Imagine waking up in a city where your rent is set by software, your job is owned by investors you'll never meet, your hospital cuts corners to pay debt, and the police use private algorithms to decide your future. That sounds like Cyberpunk, but pieces of it already exists right now. And the strangest part is, the most important companies in the story are not the ones with flying cars, robot cops, or glowing skyscrapers. They are boring companies with names like RealPage, Securus, CoreLogic, Gainwell, and Central Square. Quiet companies, hidden companies, companies that may be building America's operating system today. Private equity sounds complicated, but the basic idea is simple. Investors raise a giant pile of money, they use that money plus borrowed money to buy a company. Then they make it more profitable, sometimes through better management, sometimes through layoffs, higher prices, fewer workers, or more fees. Then a few years later, they sell it for more than they paid. That is the normal story everybody knows. Buy, squeeze, sell. In the 1980s, this exploded through leveraged buyouts. Firms like KKR became famous for buying companies with debt, taking control and forcing them to generate cash. Back then, the targets were often factories, brands, retailers, or old American companies. It was Wall Street kicking down the front door, but private equity today is quieter. It doesn't always want the famous company. It wants the boring company that sits inside your life. Over the last 2 decades, private equity became massive. SEC data in the research summary showed nearly 25,000 private equity funds and about 7.9 trillion in gross private equity assets by the end of 2024. That is not a little corner of finance anymore. That's an empire. And once private equity became that big, it had to find more things to buy. So it moved into healthcare, housing, software, public services, prison technology, government contractors, identity systems, and tenant screening. The stuff you don't notice until it has power over you. Cyberpunk is not just neon lights and hackers in leather jackets. The real idea is simpler. Private companies become so powerful that they start acting like governments. One of the clearest examples is RealPage. RealPage makes software for landlords. In 2021, Thoma Bravo took it private in a deal worth $10.2 billion. Then in 2024, the Department of Justice sued RealPage, alleging its software helped landlords use non-public data to recommend rents and harm millions of renters. Think about that. You're not negotiating rent with a landlord anymore. You may be negotiating against the machine trained on data for the whole market. And the machine does not care if you're tired, broke, or one paycheck away from moving back in with family. It sees rent as a number to optimize. That is Cyberpunk without the neon. Now go somewhere even darker, prisons and electronic monitoring. Securus Technologies, owed through a private equity-backed structure, provides communication, payments, education, entertainment, and monitoring tools inside thousands of correctional facilities. The research summary says it affects around 1.1 million incarcerated people. Here's the key. Private equity loves recurring revenue. And the best customer from a cold financial point of view is one who cannot leave. A prisoner cannot switch phone providers. A monitored person cannot shop for a better ankle monitor. A family calling someone inside cannot just use a computer. That is not a normal market. That's a trapped market. A trapped market that can become extremely profitable. Then there is tenant screening. CoreLogic, taken private by Stone Point Capital and Insight Partners, markets tools that screen renters using eviction records, criminal history checks, and algorithmic scoring. The research summary says its My Rental product produces more than 10 million tenant screening reports per year. To a landlord, that sounds useful, but to a renter, it can feel like standing before an invisible judge. Maybe the data is wrong, maybe the algorithm does not understand your life, maybe a mistake from years ago follows you around like a ghost, and suddenly you're not rejected by a person, you're rejected by a score. This is where the story gets less obvious. Private equity is not only buying businesses that sell to consumers, It's also buying companies that sit inside government systems. Gainwell Technologies, backed by Veritas Capital, works in Medicaid administration and payment systems. Central Square formed through a merger involving Bain Capital and Vista Equity Partners. Provides public safety software used by thousands of agencies. That means dispatch system, records, jail management, billing, reports, and more. But when the operating system of public life is built by private platforms, the public often cannot see how it works. Who audits it? Who fixes the errors? Who can appeal? Who gets paid when the system becomes more aggressive? These questions sound boring until they decide your rent, your benefits, your police report, or whether you can get an apartment. Private equity is under pressure. Many firms bought companies at high prices. Interest rates rose. Selling companies became harder. Bain and McKenzie describe a market where exits are jammed. So what do private equity firms need? They need companies with sticky revenue. They need companies people cannot easily quit. They need companies with data. They need companies that can be rolled up, automated, and sold as mission critical. Housing software is mission critical. Prison communication is mission critical. Medicaid systems are mission critical. Police software is mission critical. Biometric identity is mission critical. And that is the scary part. The more essential the service, the more attractive it becomes. The future probably will not look like Blade Runner. It will look like an app that denies your rental application. A welfare system that treats poor people like suspicious data points. A police report drafted by AI software owned by a company inside a private equity portfolio. A city where everything still technically works, but nobody knows who's in charge. That is real life cyberpunk. Not robots in the street, just ordinary people living inside a system they cannot understand, cannot leave, and cannot fight. And private equity did not invent every part of this future, but it may be the financial enigma that makes it spread faster.